Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Evile, The Unknown, out July 14th on Napalm Records. The album has 10 tracks, 47 minutes in length, and this is the band's 6th full-length studio album. They are a UK thrash metal band. As far as the design goes, there's only one word to describe it: intelligent. This record is put together in a very intelligent way, understanding where you are, where you're going, and what songs are needed in order for the fluidity of the album to be at an all-time high. When I was listening to this record for the first time, very often I wanted a certain style song to come after the song that I was currently sitting in, thinking to myself, man, this song is really good, but in order for this song to work in the context of the record, the next track needs to offer something different. And that's exactly what that song then would offer me, almost like they were reading my mind as I was going through it. This gives the record amazing ebbs and flows. It makes the record feel very connected, very engaging, very fluid, a very dynamic album all around, but still very cohesive at the exact same time. The playability of this record is undeniable, and it's a playability that's going to be there regardless if you're listening to it for the first or the 100th time. So great design on this album. As far as the sound is concerned, I feel like I have to address the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is that this album sounds a lot like Metallica. It has that DNA in it. But there are certain elements, specifically two, that help you distance yourself from that sound, from that experience. One is the design. It's a very unique design that works really well for this album. And the second one is the production. I felt like the production on this album really elevated the quality of each and every single song. Not taking always the same approach, but keeping in mind certain elements were there in order to give depth, and those elements was bass and drums. This album has a lot of volume, but it's not just big in volume, it also has width to it, and that width really came from the drums and bass sound and how they are incorporated with one another, and then how they are incorporated in the overall bigger picture of the sound experience on this album. So great job with the production, really gives quality to this record, and it gives the album a slight fingerprint that makes it unique to the band, it makes it unique to the album, and gives quality to the overall experience. Now within that sound, I want to talk about bass drums first, and then I want to touch on the guitars. The bass and drums are predominant on this record, but they're not necessarily working in a way that puts them in the forefront. They're a little bit more the ones pulling all the heavy load, all the heavy weight in the background. This is an album that's very guitar centric and very guitar driven. So if you have that in the forefront, you need two elements in the background that pop enough but not overpower everything else around it, but help create a sense of distance between where the guitars are and the rest of the sound is. The drums and bass really do that well across each and every single song. I mean, the bass on this album pops throughout. You can hear the bass clearly. It has a nice impact. It offers a nice texture to the sound. It helps ground, but at the same time, it also helps stretch it out, connecting with the drums really well. The drums that also have a very warm sound nature to them. I really like the snare on this record. Very powerful, very thick in its sound, but not, once again, not overly powerful, not overly thick. Working well, combining really well. It's an album that really uses the drums and bass almost as one in order to have a very specific design, in order to have a very specific sound characteristic that puts a mark on each and every single song and stays consistent, not in the delivery, but in the mark that it leaves across all 10 tracks. When it comes to the guitars, like I said, this is a very guitar-centric album. You see that in the riffs and the melodies and the solos and in the overall sound. It's an album that at times feels very aggressive guitar-wise, at times it feels very melancholic, but one thing that you can say always about it is that the guitars have a certain thickness, a certain texture to them. That texture stays consistent regardless of the movement, regardless of the momentum, regardless of the tempo. So that is something that grounds the album, that connects the record and connects all of the different songs on this album, regardless of having a different starting point and a different finish line, and almost changing on how you go from point A to point B. It's important in order to create a sense of dynamic, in order to create a sense of differences from track to track so that the album doesn't become repetitive, but still connecting all the songs, because the characteristics, the spinal cord, it's pretty much the same and stays consistent throughout. So it's a very intelligent way of creating differences while still keeping everything very well tight together. I enjoy the guitar sound. I enjoy the solos on this record. I mean, the solos is definitely one of the bright spots of the album because you feel like the record infuses a lot of energy with them. It has a lot of brightness with them. And a record like this only works if the solos are out of this world almost. Because when you have a very guitar-centric album and the focus is on that guitar sound across each and every single song, you need solos that break away from that monotony and take you in a different direction. And I honestly felt like this album offered that with every single solo. They took you a little bit on a different journey, allowing you to almost forget the overall guitar sound that was present on the track. As far as vocals are concerned, Old Drake delivers a strong and consistent performance from start to end. All I gotta say is that if Metallica ever needs somebody to fill in for James Hetfield, look no further than Old Drake. He can definitely do it. He has a little bit of that Hetfield charisma to him, and on an album that sounds a lot like Metallica, his voice fits in like a glove. Now, overall, this is definitely a better record than its predecessor. It obviously gonna hit some people differently. If you're coming in and you don't want to hear an album that sounds a lot like a Metallica record, just with better overall production and a better design as well, then, you know, it is what it is. But to me, this is Evile. They are a thrash metal band, and they are a throwback thrash metal band. So this is a sound that represents an era. This is a sound that represents a genre. They did it really well on this album. I think they were able to connect the dots extremely well. The design is one of the best that I've seen on any of their records. And this album has great songs all around. That's undeniable. So when you put all of those pieces together, regardless of what reminds you of, the album stays on its own. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with The Mask We Wear. Great drum and bass sound on this track, completing that heavier, thicker guitar sound. So you have that heavier, thicker guitar sound in the forefront, and then you have this bass drum sound behind it that really gives it some oomph, gives it also some depth. It allows the more methodic, heavy sound to work really well. The vocals help to free up the song. The vocals give the song a little bit of room to breathe because everything else seems so tight together, feels so intertwined, that the only thing that really breaks through that spider web is the vocals. It also has a great solo section that also breaks a little bit away from the song, but that's something that's true not just on this track, but on almost every single track on the album. Vocally and musically, it's a very complete track. It's balanced, but it's also dynamic. Very engaging song all around. Next we have When Mortal Coils Shed. Now this is the longest track on the album, just a little bit over the 7-minute mark, but it's one of the best, if not the best song on the record. I would go as far as to call it a ballad. It's definitely the softer song on the album. It allows for some more melancholic, melodic moments, specifically in the verses, and then with some more heaviness, a little bit more grit hitting you in the chorus. So it alternates the calm, peaceful, introspective experience with a more exteriorization of those emotions in a more raw, melodic, heavy way, both musically and vocally. The guitars help define the emotion that exists in the sound, and then the vocals define that same emotion in the lyrical content. So you have two different elements that come together, offering a very similar experience, and that gives a lot of strength, a lot of power to a song, like I said, comes across as the ballad on this record. Last but definitely not least, Sleepless Eyes. This song comes right after When Mortal Coils Shed. So you go from having a ballad style song with one of the fastest, heaviest songs on the record. When I was listening to this album and I'm going through When Mortal Coils Shed, like I said, one of my favorite songs, if not my favorite song on this record, right before the end of that track, I'm like, well, the next song, you gotta turn it all the way to 11. You need to increase the tempo because this song was really slow. It was really good, but really slow. And Sleepless Eyes did that. They turned it all the way to 11. It's a song that has a higher tempo, moves well, ripping track, no prisoners, no holds bar, shredding from start to finish, a very guitar styled song with old school thrash metal elements in the vocals, in the design, in the guitar sound. It's just a great ripping track all around. The vocals have a lot of grit in it, and that grit matches the overall aggression that the guitars offer into the overall sound experience. Great song all around, in the perfect place in order to really pop and give more meaning to the song that came before. This is it. Evile with The Unknown, out July 14th on Napalm Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.